This video is brought to you in collaboration with WoWhead.com. Hello everyone! Last week we talked about the ordering of Draenor, the way in which life established on the planet, and how the different areas of the world came to be. This week we're going to talk about the differences when it comes to the whole Rise of the Horde and Invasion of Azeroth storyline, which begins with the Draenei, who were forced to make a crash landing on the planet. Velen and those that stood with him, they refused to join Sargeras and the Legion, and the Naru, Khur, Ka'ara and Dor, they aided the exiles as they move around in the dimensional fortress called the Genedar. Traveling like that, it cost immense amounts of energy which came from the Naru spirits, and over time they weakened. The time for running, it eventually came to an end, as they were forced to crash on a planet that the Draenei named Draenor, meaning Exile's Refuge. As they made the final journey, the Naru Kar, it lost its touch with the connection to the light, and the void began to consume it. As a final good act, it was able to convince the Draenei to eject it from their ship before we start to fight its fellow Naru, but that was easier said than done though, since the void energy, it was coursing through its body and it started to lash out. Velen heroically stepped in. He used the light to shield the other two Naru, and they cast Kara away from the vessel. For centuries, Kara would drift in the skies above Shadowmoon Valley, but the battle had injured Velen and it sapped much of his strength. His ability to foresee future events, it became unreliable, and it would take him centuries to fully recover. The other two Naru, they were too weak to land on Draenor safely, and as the vessel crashed into the ground, it killed Dor and many of the Draenei on board. Khur, the last Naru standing, it told the survivors to quickly leave the ship as it too was decaying and was turning towards the void. Velen and the Draenei, they were truly alone, and as far as they knew, this would be the last world that they would ever see. They built the city of Shattrath upon the site where once Goria was devoured. They built Karabor, which would become one of the most beautiful and holiest sites, and they built Akhndun. This was to house the remains of Dor, who had been starting to draw in the souls of the dead Draenei, and the same had happened with Khur, only that one started to draw in the souls of departed orcs. Ka'ara became known as the Dark Star for the Shadowmoon clan, and they worshipped it, even trying to access its power, but touching those void energies, you might imagine that's not too good for your health, and it shattered their minds, and soon enough they decided that the Dark Star's power, that was not meant to be wielded by mortals. If anyone continued messing with it, they would be exiled out of their Shadowmoon Valley. So here we have the Draenei introduced to the world of Draenor, and their coming had a massive impact on the world. The ogres were not happy with them building upon Goria, but the Draenei, they repelled them easily enough, which showed the orcs that the Draenei, they were not as harmless as they had thought. Some decided to stay away from them, some attacked them if they'd go into their territory, and the Bladewing clan, they decided to attack their caravans and take some of the Draenei prisoners. It would have been easy for the Draenei to destroy this clan, but Velen forbade it, fearing that this would lead to an all-out war with the orcs, and instead decided to go for rescue missions and better protection for the caravans. All the Draenei wanted was to live in peace on Draenor and not cause any harm, something that was clearly shown when two young orcs, Orgrim and Durotan, they were saved from an attacking Heimal ogre by the Draenei. They were even invited to sit down with the Prophet, who took the moment and observed the orcs, and he found no hatred in their hearts, quite the opposite. This meeting would be one of the last peaceful encounters between the orcs and the Draenei, as the Legion had found their targets. Now, I'm not going to go into complete details when it comes to origin story. I'm going to assume that you're familiar with it, and we're going to focus mainly on the changes. Like before, it was Talgoth that found the Draenei. Since their crash landing on the planet, it had sent out massive waves of holy energy throughout the twisting nether, and this drew his attention. Like before, he observed the orcs and he reported back to Kil'jaeden, who ordered his servant to stay out of this conflict, as they would turn the orcs against the Draenei. Talgoth was quite pissed about this. He had not spent millennia hunting the Draenei just so that the primitive orcs could spill their blood. Normally Kil'jaeden would have punished such insubordination, but he understood the anger, yet was unmoved, and he sent his servant away. He needed an agent, an orc that could manipulate the rest of their people to follow Kil'jaeden's will, and although there were many candidates amongst the orc, none of them had such potential as Gul'dan. He was born with a physical weakness into a small clan at the edge of Gorgrond, and the other orcs saw his twisted form as an ill omen, and they eventually exiled him. The elder shaman took pity on Gul'dan and told him to go to the throne of elements, and there he might find his purpose in life from the spirits. The spirits, they gazed upon Gul'dan, and they sensed the darkness and fury in the orc's heart, and they rejected him.
But in their absence, other voices whispered.
Kil'jaeden promised Gul'dan power, enough power that no one would ever pity him again, and he would become like a god, if only he would help the Legion with turning the Orcs into a weapon to destroy the Draenei. The first Orcish warlock was born in that moment, as Gul'dan gladly accepted the dark bargain. He informed his new master of a time where the Orcs came together against the threat to save the elements from the Ogre's influence. If Kil'jaeden could recreate that elemental upheaval, perhaps the clans would repeat history, so he guided Gul'dan, they attacked the Throne of Elements with fell magic, and the elements were thrown into chaos. Long droughts were followed by heavy rain, floods devastated regions in Gorgrond and parts of Nagrand. Snowstorms blanketed parts of the Nan jungle and Terragar forest in ice. Rivers and streams soon enough dried up, which caused the wildlife to die by the thousands, and this caused massive suffering to the Orcs. Their shamans could offer no guidance, since they could no longer properly communicate with the elements, and Gul'dan used his magic to throw in a bit of rat pox, which took out a whole lot of Orcs. One amongst those who fell to this disease was Chieftain Garona of the Frostwolf clan, which left his son Durotan to lead them all, and as you can imagine, the Orcs were desperate for answers. Gul'dan was a perfect ally for the Legion, but the Orcs would never follow someone like him. They needed a figurehead under their control, which the Orcs would trust, whose words the Orcs would trust, and it was the shaman Ner'zhul of the Shadowmoon clan, respected by many, that was the perfect target. After engulfing the clan of his birth in Felfire to make sure that nobody knew where he came from, Gul'dan infiltrated the Shadowmoon clan, hiding away his fel powers, and he gained Ner'zhul's trust. He even managed to become Ner'zhul's apprentice, and through Gul'dan, Kil'jaeden began to twist Ner'zhul's thoughts. As Kil'jaeden did his thing with Ner'zhul, Gul'dan was sent on a different task. The Orcs were in peril, they were working on Ner'zhul, somebody that the Orcs could trust, and now the Orcs had to believe that the Draenor were the enemy, and it was Gul'dan who would make it so. The Bladewind clan had suffered greatly from the elemental unrest and the red pox, which has claimed the lives of 70% of their clan. The Warlock approached them as a representative of the Shadowmoon clan, and he convinced them that the Draenei were the ones responsible for their problems. If they were to spill the blood of the Draenei, such an act would surely appease the elemental spirits. As all Orcs, the Bladewinds held the Shadowmoon in high regard, and they had no reason to distrust Gul'dan. They did as they were told, and they assaulted Draenei caravans in greater numbers than ever before. They murdered dozens of innocents and took just as many prisoners. One of those prisoners was Liren, sister of Marad, who could sit by no longer. Velen still tried to maintain the peace, but when the Rangari reported back with information about the brutal sacrifices that were being made, he reluctantly agreed, and the Draenei fought back. Marad was sadly enough too late to save his sister, and the sight of her mutilated dead body, it enraged him and he rampaged through the village. The Bladewinds were desperate to please the elements, so they fought until nearly every one of them were dead, and those that did try to escape, they were struck down by Gul'dan. He was enjoying the show from a distance, and none would survive to tell the truth of what had happened that day. Only Gul'dan's version would make it out, as he told the Shadowmoon clan all about how the Draenei had launched an unprovoked slaughter against the Bladewinds. Word of this quickly spread amongst the other clans, and the seed of hatred towards the Draenei, it took roots. Now, just as before in the original story, Kil'jaeden used the image of the Orc ancestral spirits, like Rokan for Ner'zhul, to confirm what Gul'dan had told them. The Horde was formed, the war was on, but Ner'zhul began to doubt, and he made his way to Oshu'gan to communicate with the spirits. In this version, Kil'jaeden is actually aware of his plans, and he told Gul'dan to prepare, to find those who could help him keep control of the Shadowmoon clan, as Ner'zhul turned out not to be the leader that the Demon Lord had hoped him to be. The real ancestors informed Ner'zhul about what was going on, but by the time that he got back, it was already far too late. Gul'dan and his followers, they took Ner'zhul before he could reach his clan, and despite many of the new warlocks wishing to murder Ner'zhul, Gul'dan forbade it, as Kil'jaeden, he wanted Ner'zhul to watch what would become of the Orcish race. Besides this delicious torture, it was also out of necessity, since Ner'zhul suddenly disappearing, that would raise suspicion amongst the other clans. In the months to come, Gul'dan and his warlocks would constantly abuse Ner'zhul and treat him as little more than a slave. The elder shaman feared death, and he would become too weak to disobey his masters. Over time, he would fade from the public eye, and his usurpers would become the voice of the Shadowmoon clan. While the Horde was fighting against the Draenei just as Kil'jaeden wanted, they were also fighting amongst each other. Especially chieftains like Gromar's Hellscream and Blackhand, they argued over battle tactics, and Kil'jaeden understood that what the Orcs needed was a leader. They needed a war chief. It was Blackhand that was the best choice, and despite Gul'dan being pretty pissed at him not being the war chief, his fear for Kil'jaeden, it prevented him from speaking out. After teaching some of the Blackrock shamans the way of the warlock, and magically aging and empowering their young, Black Hand agreed to take up leadership of the Horde, while it was actually Gul'dan and the Shadow Council. They were the ones who were pulling the strings from behind the curtains. This council consisted of those trusted and loyal to Gul'dan, but not just orcs were accepted. For example, there was Garona half-Orcan, a union between a Bladewind orc and a Draenei slave that proved to be a ferocious fighter, and she possessed a keen intelligence and a gift with learning new languages. Originally, it was said that Marat's sister was Garona's mother, and although it's still not entirely impossible, I think that the way that they describe the events in the Chronicles, the time period of just 2 years, that just seems to be a bit too short. Either way, Garona managed to escape the Bladewind clan when they were destroyed by the Draenei, and eventually encountered the Shadow Council. Gul'dan sympathized with her to earn her trust, seeing how they both knew the pain of living as an outcast, and the moment that she let down her guard, the Shadow Council struck. They placed magical spells on her mind, which kept her obedient, and it allowed Gul'dan to see what she saw, and they used her as the perfect assassin.
Gul'dan sends his best.
Another non-orc example to join the council, that was the ogre Cho'gall. Where Garona was an outcast, Cho'gall had enjoyed the good life within High Maul, where he had learned from the most talented ogre sorcerers. His arrogance and lust for power, that put him at odds with the ruling elite, as they feared that his growing popularity that would allow him to take control of the city, so they made an attempt on his life. He barely survived his attempt, but now he had no other choice but to flee High Maul, thirsting for vengeance, and he came across the Shadow Council. Gul'dan could appreciate his confidence and lust for power. He made him his foremost apprentice, and he taught him the secrets of fel magic, and informed him about the Burning Legion. Cho'gall was loyal to Gul'dan for the moment, but he was also more than willing to break ties at any time. He only desired the power, and he was not interested in the Legion or the demons or Gul'dan's massive plans. The moment that Gul'dan and the Shadow Council ceased being useful, Cho'gall was prepared to turn his back on them.
We're done taking orders from you.
With his own personal council to back him up, Gul'dan worked on making the other clans accept Black Hand as the war chief. His Shadow Council agents were sent out to spread the word of Black Hand's mighty deeds, while also spying on the clans to see who opposed the Horde. A prime target that was identified was Chieftain Zaghrel of the Whiteclaw clan, who called on all the other clans to end this senseless war of the Draenei and focus their attention on shamanistic rituals. One quick command to Garona and one dagger through the heart, and that opposing voice was silenced. To seal the deal, Gul'dan preyed on the fears of the shaman at the next Kosh'argh festival, and he proclaimed that the Black Rocks had restored their strength with glorious new power, namely fel magic. Shamans of all clans eagerly accepted this new power, since the elements, they no longer answered the calls, and unanimously the Horde accepted Black Hand as their chieftain. Like the original story, Durotan of the Frostwolf clan, he was not happy with what was happening to his people, but he feared that speaking out would mean dire consequences for him and his clan, just like what had happened to the Whiteclaw clan. Black Hand was quite the leader, and he whipped the Horde into shape. So far they had just tossed their people at the Draenei, but he worked on utilizing the strengths of the different clans. The smallest and most mobile, they would act as scouts, whereas the other stronger clans, they would lead the direct assaults. Now, not all of the orcs were immediately on board with his new leadership, but they were either won over with offers of power, or by public execution, since Black Hand did not take kindly to insubordination. To help him with maintaining order and discipline, he surrounded himself with mighty lieutenants, and the greatest of them were Eitrigg, Orgrim Doomhammer, and Varrock Sourfang. A new leader and order amongst the ranks, that was all great, but the Horde needed more numbers, and to bolster this, the clans were ordered to also magically age their children, and the first signs of the fel corruption that started to show. Durotan noticed that their brown skin was becoming splotchy and green. While the Horde was rising, news reached Gul'dan about the Pale in the Grand. These are the orcs that were sent into exile after following their shamanistic ritual, and they were drawn to the Naru core within Oshu'gan. This Naru was still spilling forth the delicious void energy, and the Pale started to study this power and communicate with the Void Lords. The monstrous entities responded to the orcs, bombarding them with visions of apocalypse and revealing the secrets of using shadow magic. The void energies would over time turn their skin white, and they would start to call themselves the Pale. Now Gul'dan, he wasn't too interested in them, but Kil'jaeden was intrigued. He wanted the orcs to secure victory over the Draenei at any cost, which meant that they had to investigate the Pale and determine whether their magic could strengthen the Horde. It was Cho'gall who was sent out to investigate, and while he expected them to put up a fight, the Pale were quite happy to share the prophecy of doom, something that they called the Hour of Twilight. The Pale saw this as a time when shadow would envelop the universe and snuff out all life in existence.
Make peace with your end, for the Hour of Twilight falls.
In that very moment, their prophecies meant very little to the ogre. He was far more interested in the shadow magic that they could wield, and he used their beliefs to his advantage, claiming that if they would help the Horde, they could bring about the Hour of Twilight. The Pale reveled in this opportunity, and they pledged themselves to the Horde, forming a whole new clan known as the Twilight's Hammer. Over time, Cho'gall would also learn to master this shadow magic, and he would see the truth in the Pale's prophecy. That's still a while away though. Now with the Horde gathering their forces and building their citadel, the Draenei saw the truth of what was going on. They saw that the Legion was involved. They made ready to defend their two main cities, namely Shattrath and Karabor, abandoning all their outlying settlements. The Horde used a fel magic, and they began killing the planet of Draenor, and the elements rallied together, vowing to destroy the orcs and stop the desecration of the land. By pooling their dwindling powers together, they created one single mighty being called Kosh'argh the Fire Lord. This was supposed to stop the threat of the Horde, but Gul'dan would not give up that easily. Now many of the orcs, they saw this attack as a sign of angering the elements, but Gul'dan managed to flip it around. By pooling their powers together, the elements had made themselves vulnerable, and he would make them pay. He would steal Kosh'argh's power for himself and the rest of the Horde, and he would also destroy the connection between the orcs and the elements. With his Shadow Council followers, they wove an immense spell that flooded Kosh'argh with fel power, and it shattered the being's physical form. The mountain roared in protest, chasms tore through the earth, and rivers of fel and elemental energies it spewed forth. Gul'dan and his warlocks, they used these energies to infuse the other orcs with strength, and now their soldiers were more powerful than ever before. The last stand of the elements, it had dire consequences. The orcs' connection with them was now broken, and what remained, the fel volcano from which Kosh'argh had emerged, that would be known as the Hand of Gul'dan. With the elemental threat out of the way, Karabor was their next target, and the Draenei put up quite a fight, more than the orcs expected, but it would all be for nothing. The Darkstar, the void energies from the Naru Ka'ara, that was used by the orcs to channel it on Karabor. A massive pillar of void energy ripped through the heavens, and it slammed into the Draenei. Many of the defenders, they died instantly, while others were driven to madness, and Velen had to call on every bit of his willpower to hold the void at bay. He rallied what survivors he could, and he led them through Karabor's harbor to the final safe haven on Draenor. He led them to Shattrath city. The Temple of Karabor would be forever changed by this attack, and it was now known as the Black Temple, a place where Gul'dan and his Shadow Council would gladly make their home. The remaining Draenei defenders, they were captured for future use, and now only one more target remained to be taken. But the city, built upon the remains of Goria, there was no easy target, and the orcs needed something more. Just like before, they were offered the demon blood. Durathan was warned by Ner'zhul, who had overheard the Shadow Council plans, and he warned him not to drink, while Orgrim, he saw for himself that drinking this so-called gift, that was not a good idea. The majority of the orcs, however, they gladly accepted it, greatly increasing their power, but also shackling themselves to the will of the Legion. Not all of the orcs had drunk from Manora's blood, but those who had, they would radiate a invisible aura of fel energy, and this energy would slowly seep into the skin and bones of nearby orcs. Eventually, even orcs like Durathan and Orgrim and all the others who had not tasted the demon blood, they would find their skin turned completely green, something that was even passed on to the newly born. So here we are, the Draenei make ready to defend their city, and this time it's not the Naru that tell Velen to go, this time it's the Exarchs that tell him that their people need him as a leader, while most of the people, they would stay behind to make it look like the orcs succeeded. The Red Mist, an attack originally used by the Legion, is now explained by Gul'dan and his warlocks melding their magics with the Red Pox, which created a volatile concoction that would spread the plague amongst the Draenei. This burned their skin and choked the breath from their lungs, and the long-term effects was that the Draenei who breathed in the mist, they found their connection to the light was gone. They would devolve into something called the Broken, or even further into something that they called the Lost Ones. With Shattrath's sect, some of its survivors made their way to Akhadun, which Gul'dan knew about, and he feared that they would call upon the spirits of their ancestors that would aid them in the war against the Horde. To deal with them, Terangor and some of the forces were sent out, who used their new abilities to try and summon a powerful demon to strike down their enemies. Instead of summoning a demon, they accidentally summoned an otherworldly elemental known as Murmur, and his entry into the world, it sent out a massive shockwave that ripped the earth asunder, killing many of the Draenei inside and leaving Akhadun as we know it today. Some of the warlocks, they were left behind to keep Murmur under control, so they could not use its incredible might against the Horde. So Shattrath has now fallen, many of the Draenei are dead, and those that did escape, they held out within the Zangarmarsh. Blackhand had more goals than just exterminate the Draenei though. He wanted to conquer all of Draenor. Kil'jaeden led the Bleeding Hollow into Farallon, leeching life from the primals, and used the stolen power to burn down the forest. As the wilds burned, Kil'jaeden and his army slaughtered every Botania Janissar that they could find. Meanwhile, the Warsong and the Twilight Clan, they toppled the ogres of Highmaul, while Frostwolf, Whiteclaw and Thunderlord, they were ordered to wipe out the Grun, Ogron and Magnaron, and many of the ogres that had not joined the Horde. One of the few Grunn that actually survived this assault, he was called Gruul, and he would defend his lair in Gorgrond. Not even the Arakoa were safe from the might of the Horde. As Kosh'argh of Bladefist, he formed an invasion force from the Shattered Hand, the Burning Blade and the Dragonmaw clans. They made a pact with the Arakoa outcast, who joined them in this fight, but in the end Kosh'argh, he turned his blade on all the Arakoa that he could find, either murdering them on the spot or tossing them in the cursed blood of Sephe, enjoying the sight of the high Arakoa writhing in agony. Only a small number of the Arakoa would actually survive, shrouding themselves in the shadows, hiding away from the Horde in the deepest corners of Terrakar Forest. Some of the Arakoa banded together under the leadership of a former Skyreach guard named Krizik, who led his followers to Auchindoun, knowing that most of the orcs feared the haunted ruins. He held on to a bitter hatred for the Horde, and he waited for the day when he might get his vengeance on those who had spilled the blood of his people. Now this is where one of the more interesting changes to the storyline take place. In the past, Kil'jaeden saw that the city of Shattrath had fallen, and he just abandoned the orcs to their fate. Time passed, Medivh, under the influence of Sargeras, he made contact with Gul'dan, and he showed him the way to Azeroth. These all seemed very disconnected from each other, like Kil'jaeden was just working on his own, and Sargeras had very little to do with it. Now, it's actually Sargeras that directly ordered Kil'jaeden to cut all communication with Gul'dan, since he wanted them to be desperate enough to embark on any quest if it meant saving their lives. The orcs were powerful weapons that the Lord of the Legion could use to weaken Azeroth and get it ready for an invasion. But before they were ready, they had to come down from the rush of victory, and as time passed on, things didn't get any better for the Horde. Their planet was corrupted and dying, demon blood was pumping in their veins, and with no enemy to fight, they often turned on each other. At just the right moment, Gul'dan was informed about Azeroth, and they created the Dark Portal with not the sacrifice of one single Draenei child. Instead, it were many more, the prisoners that they had taken throughout their long campaign, something that you could also see in the Warcraft movie. The Dark Portal was established, and the Horde made ready for their first invasion of Azeroth. That's the new version of Rise of the Horde in a nutshell, and the story of the war between the Alliance and Horde, that pretty much stayed the same for the most part. There is a bit of additional information when it comes to what Medivh was like, how Lane Rin became the king, but for the most part, it is as we know it. For those wondering, how does Ner'zhul fit in all of this with these changes? Well, it's pretty much the same. The Horde got their asses kicked during the first invasion, Terrangor informs him about the artifacts, and they work on making more portals to different worlds. Near the end of the story, Ner'zhul abandons his people just like he's done before, and this could lead into him becoming the Lich King. Now, it is less of an evil character. In the past, Ner'zhul really took the spotlight, right? And in the Chronicles, that doesn't really happen, but the essence is still the same. Now, to wrap up this video, I have a couple of final things to talk about that really stood out for me. First of all, about Medivh. Medivh was actually summoned to Karazhan by his mother Egwene, and Morus, the butler that you see there, he was actually a close friend of hers who agreed to stay with Medivh and help maintain the tower. Medivh was actually quite a playboy during the day, very similar to the Medivh that we see in One Night at Karazhan, but at night he would do the most awful things. Opening the Dark Portal that alarmed Egwene, who could sense that a Guardian's power was used to do this, her son's power. So she set out to confront him together with a blue dragon named Archenagos, one of the few allies that she had made during her long years of exile. The truth of Sargeras' corruption was revealed. Archenagos was burned into Nightbane as we know him today, and the Guardians clashed with each other. Sargeras was definitely mighty, but Egwene had experience, so the Demon Lord, he reached out and drained the life of the hundreds of humans who were fleeing the Tower of Karazhan. He pushed Medivh to destroy Egwene once and for all, but a small part of the Guardian, it was still able to resist, and instead she was banished. Not even Medivh knew what he had sent her, but he could not sense her presence anywhere on Azeroth. The only person to survive this brutal attack, that was the human Morus, who was driven half mad by what he had witnessed. Medivh tried to ease his suffering by purging the memories of that day, but even so, the poor man was never the same, and neither was the tower, since it was now haunted by many spirits of those who were used for the spell.
I've gone and made a mess. Now, where was I?
Garona half-Orcan has a fair few changes in her story arc, mainly with Gul'dan being able to see what she saw. She had a gift for learning new languages, and from the human prisoners she found out about Karazhan and Medivh. She had the hope of inspecting the tower without being noticed, but her timing was pretty bad since Medivh, he was in a dark mood after his deadly battle with Egwene, and he captured Garona the moment that she stepped inside of the tower. The assassin thought that her life was over, but Medivh felt sympathy for her, seeing how she was also an outcast, and he was intrigued by her intelligence, by her entire existence. It was clear to him that Garona was no threat, and thanks to Gul'dan's endless cruelty, she had no real love for the Horde. He decided that it would be more valuable to have her as an ally or even a friend amongst the orcs, rather than another spirit haunting his home, so he set her free and he even invited her to come back whenever she liked. She did just that, something that Medivh's new apprentice Khadgar could not appreciate at first, but over time they developed a friendship and they even discovered that it was Medivh who had opened up the dark portal. Once they found out, they quickly escaped the tower to get help from Stormwind, and when Gul'dan realized that Garona was in the same room as King Lane, he tried to use his magic to force her to kill the king, but Garona was actually able to resist this murderous urge. Lothar, Khadgar and Garona, and a couple of forces, they made their way back to the tower, they confronted the Guardian, and in that battle, Medivh assaulted her mind, trying to take control of Gul'dan's mental chains and use her against her allies. His spell work was only partially effective, confusion rippled through the half-orc, and she soon found it impossible to differentiate between friend or foe. She fled the tower and made her way back to Stormwind to inform King Lane of what had happened, but standing near the king, something snapped in her mind.
Bad news, sire.
She had resisted Gul'dan's order to kill the king before, but her fight with the Guardian, it had scrambled her thoughts. The line between friend and foe blurred, her willpower faltered, and with tears streaming down her face, she obeyed the command and plunged the dagger into Lane's heart. This explains why Garona still killed Lane, even though Gul'dan at this point ended up in a coma. This would explain why that still happened. Now, after the assassination, Garona escaped the keep in the confusion that followed, and without their king, Stormwind eventually fell to the Horde. But as we all know, the Alliance of Lordaeron would win the war over Azeroth. They shut down the Dark Portal, they built Netherguard Keep to keep an eye on things, and it was there where Garona made contact with Khadgar. She had fought her way back into control, she shrugged away as many of Gul'dan's lingering mental chains as she could, and she confessed to killing the king, and Khadgar believed her when she told him that she had no choice. He could see the Shadow Council spellwork still woven through her thoughts, and the next few months they worked on unraveling the Council's hold on Garona. They were actually successful, and for the first time in her life, Garona was free. In gratitude, she offered to do whatever she could to hunt down the Shadow Council still left on Azeroth, an offer that Khadgar gladly accepted. Eventually, the Dark Portal reopened, and the Horde came back for the second invasion, and despite wishing to join the Alliance forces as they took the battle to Draenor, Khadgar requested her to stay behind and keep on hunting the Shadow Council. Her journey would eventually put her on the trail of Cho'gall to the mysterious lands of Kalimdor, while the Sons of Lothar, they did their best to prevent the Horde from invading different planets, eventually being forced to shut down the portal on Draenor's side. Now, what's really interesting is that there's no mention of a love relation between Medivh and Garona. There's no mention of a pregnancy or Medan. We already knew that Blizzard made the decision to retcon the events with Medan in the comics, but they haven't explained what exactly did happen. Cutting out Medan is fine and all, but it doesn't explain what happens with Cho'gall, the Twilight Hammer, the events of Garona and C'Thun and Varian, all those events in the comics. It doesn't explain what exactly happened. Hopefully, we'll find that information in the next Chronicle, and I've said this many times now, but I can highly recommend picking up the Chronicle for yourself. There are a lot more details that I haven't touched upon yet, like how the different Orcish clans migrated, Deathwing, the artifacts that they needed. Those storylines will be incorporated in future lore videos. If you want more details or read up on what we talked about today, then check out the related WoWhead article in the description down below. Right then, ladies and gentlemen, that's me done for today. I feel like we've been going on for long enough. As always, thank you so very much for watching, everyone. Subscribe if you like my videos, leave a like if you enjoyed this one, and until next time, guys, see ya!